Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Friendly Friday, a weekly series where we take a look at budget, standard or modern decks, and this week we're taking a look at Blue-Black Improvise in standard, a deck revolving around the Improvise mechanic from Aether Revolt, and by far the biggest reason to play the deck is so you can play with Herald of Anguish, a 7 mana 5/5 with flying that has Improvise, so we can tap any number of artifacts to pay for the generic mana cost when we go cast the Herald of Anguish, letting us cast the Herald of Anguish as early as turn 4 in this deck pretty reliably. And so besides being a 5/5 flyer, at the beginning of our end step, each opponent has to discard a card, so if they don't have a removal spell for it right away, we already get some value out of our Herald, making the opponent discard, and as if that weren't enough, we can also pay 2 mana to sacrifice an artifact and give target creature -2/-2 until end of turn. So Herald of Anguish is a very nice payoff and win condition for the deck. Now let's take a look at the entire list, starting out with a Renegade Map, which is kind of like a mana source in this deck. So it's a 1 mana artifact that enters the battlefield tapped, but we can also tap it and sacrifice it to search for any basic land and put that into our hand. So in the early game we can use Renegade Map as an additional mana source, thanks to our many Improvise cards, but then if we're about to miss a land drop we can just sacrifice it and grab a basic, and it also helps us fix our mana since we can get any basic. Next up we have 4 copies of Fatal Push as some creature removal, very efficient, taking out any creature with convert mana cost 2 or less, and with Revolt enabled, any creature with convert mana cost 4 or less, and we do have some nice Revolt enablers in this deck, and Renegade Map is definitely one of them. By just sacrificing the map we'll enable Revolt so we can take down larger creatures with our Fatal Push. Next up we get to Cogworker's Puzzleknot, one of the artifacts in this deck that makes multiple artifacts, so very nice with our Improvise cards, since when the Cogworker's Puzzleknot enters the battlefield we get a 1/1 colorless Servo artifact creature token, and then later in the game we can also pay 1 and a white, sacrifice the Puzzleknot to get an additional Servo token, and there are a few ways in this deck to generate white mana despite not having any white lands in the deck. Speaking of which, we have 4 copies of Prophetic Prism, a 2 mana artifact that when it enters the battlefield we get to draw a card, so we're not down on card advantage, and then we still get the benefit of having an additional artifact in play for Improvise purposes, and we can also use the Prophetic Prism to filter mana of different colors, so we can pay a mana, tap it, add 1 mana of any color, so we can filter blue mana into white mana for example, to enable our Cogworker's Puzzleknot in the late game. Then we have 4 copies of Servo Schematic, which is very similar to the Cogworker's Puzzleknot. When it enters battlefield we get a 1/1 colorless Servo artifact creature token, but we also get one when the Servo Schematic leaves the battlefield. And you already know about the Herald of Anguish letting us sacrifice artifacts, so we can sacrifice the Servo Schematic and still get an additional Servo token, so in that way it's slightly better than the Cogworker's Puzzleknot, but of course we can't sacrifice the Servo Schematic with cards like Prophetic Prism in the late game. To get that additional Servo token you do need a way to sacrifice the Servo Schematic, which you might not always have. Next up we have 2 copies of Treasure Map, a nice addition from Ixalan, an artifact that lets us scry 1, and then if we used it 3 times we get to transform it into Treasure Cove, and we also get 3 treasure tokens, which are nice for Improvise, but we can also just sacrifice them to the Treasure Cove to draw additional cards, which is always nice. Then we have 4 copies of Contraband Kingpin, a 2 mana 1/4 with lifelink that helps us stay alive, and then whenever an artifact enters a battlefield under our control we get to scry 1, and of course with all those different artifacts and Servo tokens there's a lot of scry 1 action going on, so Kingpin definitely helps us find our big payoff cards like Herald of Anguish for example, so it's definitely an important piece of the puzzle. Next up we have another Improvise card in Metallic Rebuke, 3 mana, Improvise, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3 mana, so just a mana leak with Improvise, costs 1 mana more, but if you do have 2 artifacts you can just cast it for a single blue mana, which is very powerful as not everyone will expect it or play around it, so that's another big payoff for being an Improvise deck. Then we also have 3 copies of Tezzeret the Schemer, another payoff card for having this many artifacts in our deck. Tezzeret starts with 5 loyalty and his +1 makes an Ethereum Cell, which is basically a treasure token that we can sacrifice to add 1 mana. Then the -2 gives a creature +X -X, where X is the number of artifacts we control, so most of the time this is just a clean removal spell if we have a few artifacts in play. And the ultimate at just -7 can also be game winning, as every turn it will turn one of our artifacts into a 5/5 creature that also can help us close out the game. Then we have one spicy copy of Reverse Engineer, 5 mana, Improvise, draw 3 cards, so a nice way to refuel. Next up we have 2 copies of Deadeye Plunderers from Ixalan, which is another important win condition in the deck, and it may look like just a limited card, but in this deck it's actually quite powerful. So for 5 mana we get a 3/3, but the Plunderers also has +1/+1 for each artifact we control, so sometimes for 5 mana we might get an 8/8, that only gets bigger from there, and for 4 mana we can also make a treasure token, which helps us with our various synergies, and also just helps us grow the Plunderers to an even larger size. Then of course 4 copies of Herald of Anguish, which is a reason to play the deck, and then finally 2 more removal spells and 2 more Improvise cards in Battle at the Bridge, X and Black for an Improvise card that says target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, and you gain X life, so a powerful effect that can even help us take out the indestructible gods from Amonkhet, and also gains us life, which is very valuable against aggro decks. Then our mana base is very straightforward. We've got 6 swamps, 6 islands, 4 Fetid Pools, which we can also cycle for 2 mana, and then 4 Drowned Catacombs, which will enter battlefield untapped most of the time. Then going over to the sideboard real quick, we've got 1 copy of Jace's Defeat as a nice versatile counter spells against blue decks or just decks playing blue creatures as well. Then we've got 3 copies of Negate against the various control decks. We've got 1 Vizier of the Many Faces to copy valuable creatures from the opponent. We've got 2 copies of Gifted Aetherborn, which is nice against the aggressive red decks, but also against the hexproof green creatures. We've got a Gonti, Lord of Luxury, which is nice in any grindy matchup where card advantage is important. We've got 2 copies of Tezzeret's Touch when we want to switch gears and just turn into a more aggressive deck. We can turn any of our artifacts into 5/5s. Also combines very nicely with Servo Schematic, since if the opponent goes to destroy the Servo Schematic, we get a 1/1 Servo token, and then we get the Servo Schematic back into our hand, so we don't lose any card advantage. And then we have 2 copies of Crook of Condemnation against the various graveyard-based decks. And finally 3 copies of Scrapheap Scrounger, which can also be part of a transformational plan against control decks, where we turn into a more aggressive deck with some resilient threats such as the Scrapheap Scrounger. Alright, that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw here, but unfortunately a pretty mana light hand with some of our most expensive cards, so unfortunately I think we have to mulligan this one. And this looks like a keep. Got some lands, some Prophetic Prisms, and I think I'll keep the Contraband Kingpin as an early blocker, but also as a way to filter our draws with all these artifacts that we can scry with. Opponent has a Minister of Inquiries, so it looks like some sort of graveyard deck. So I think we'll just play out a tapped Fetid Pools and say go. And then next turn we can run out the Kingpin and then play out our artifacts to help us find some of our payoff cards. Opponent is just attacking with the Minister of Inquiries, interesting. So they might have different plans for that energy. As we see Greenbelt Rampager, alright, so opponent just using the 2 energy from the Minister to run out a Rampager, but our opponent seems to be stuck on 1 mana. So that's the good news, and Contraband Kingpin can just block the Greenbelt Rampager. So that's also nice. Hopefully our opponent doesn't have any tricks to push through the Kingpin. Opponent did find a land number 2. And do they attack? If they do not, that's good. So here I think I like running out the Servo Schematic, since we'll get 2 scries with the Kingpin to look for land number 4. Although the Prophetic Prism lets us scry one and then draw a card, but there's not that many 1 mana cards that we really need to draw. So I think we'll go with the Schematic. Now that our Kingpin is still in play and we get some more scries out of it. So let's scry, Puzzleknot goes to the bottom, and Renegade Map I think we can also put on the bottom. So had we played Prophetic Prism, we could have capped the Renegade Map and then been able to play it as well, so maybe got punished a little bit for running out Servo Schematic instead. But I think this is still fine. Next turn, if anything, we can just run out a Reverse Engineer and draw some extra cards. Opponent cycles a Vizier of Tumbling Sands, so our opponent looks to be on some sort of combo deck, maybe with the 5 mana artifact that lets them untap all their permanents, and then our opponent can maybe go off in one big turn. As we see Servant of the Conduit, so another mana creature / energy card. Untap, find a Battle at the Bridge, so we could go with a Prophetic Prism, try to scry into a land. Let's say we hit a land, then we can play it. and still cast Reverse Engineer, so the payoff is definitely very big if we manage to find an untapped land with Prophetic Prism, and I think it's probably worth it here. So let's go for it. So here we want to make sure to click on the Prophetic Prism first, so we get to scry first with the Kingpin, and then we get to draw. So Kingpin we can scry to the bottom, and then we get to draw. And do we find a land? We do, but it's one of our few tap lands in this spot, which I think I'll still play out here and say go. So didn't quite get there, but we're still in a fine spot here, I think, since next turn we get to run out Tezzeret if we want to, or we can draw a bunch more cards and then play Tezzeret the turn after. Opponent showing us red mana in Sheltered Thicket and a Cultivator's Caravan. Alright, so that can definitely start attacking us, and we don't have a great way to deal with it, as our removal spells in hand are sorcery speed. Opponent running out a Rampager just to make an energy, and no attacks from the opponent. Deadeye Plunderers is actually not a bad draw, since that will be able to block the Caravan at some point. But for now I think we want a Prophetic Prism and then Reverse Engineer or Battle at the Bridge. So let's start by playing out a Prophetic Prism. Again, we want to scry before drawing. And Swamp, let's see, we haven't played a land yet. So actually I think I'm okay with taking a Swamp, since that'll let us cast the Plunderers next turn. And then we can still Reverse Engineer here if we want to. Or we can take out, let's say, the Rampager from the opponent, but I don't think the Rampager is a big problem at the moment, although it does crew the Caravan, but our opponent has enough creatures that they can still crew the Caravan pretty easily. So I think we just Reverse Engineer here, cast Reverse Engineer, tapping these as well, just in case we find something like a Fatal Push. We do find a Fatal Push, and I think we actually cast that right now. I think we'll go ahead and kill the Greenbelt Rampager. Perhaps the Minister of Inquiries is more important for the opponent's combo, I'm not entirely sure. So we do manage to take out Rampager. Our opponent decided to mill us with the Minister of Inquiries. So that might actually be their win condition, is to mill us out with the Minister of Inquiries, and then untapping the Minister of Inquiries with the Paradox Engine. But we still have a Battle at the Bridge to take out the Minister. Weaver of Currents can ramp out a Paradox Engine next turn and another Servant of the Conduit, but they don't have the Paradox Engine quite yet. They do still have a Greenbelt Rampager in hand, so yeah, I think we definitely need to take care of the opponent's Minister of Inquiries here. So on our turn we have a few options. We can use Tezzeret to take out the Minister, we can use Battle at the Bridge, can now even also use Fail Push. I think we want to add the Plunderers to the board, just to get a win condition in play. I guess we can use Battle at the Bridge to take out the Minister. So let's run out the Plunderers, and then we can Battle at the Bridge, and Improvise will be 4 here, so we'll also gain 4 life. And then we can keep the Fatal Push to maybe snipe the Greenbelt Rampager in the opponent's turn even. Opponent mills us for 2 again. Minister down, and we'll say go. So we've got a 7/7 Deadeye Plunderers, Tezzeret coming down next turn, either generating more artifacts or taking out the opponent's creatures. And then we can start applying some pressure. And there's the Paradox Engine that we were expecting. So whenever opponent casts a spell, they get to untap all non-land permanents they control. So yeah, if they did still have the Minister of Inquiries in play, combined with the Greenbelt Rampager in their hand, they would have been able to mill us out entirely. So that's a pretty scary combo, since they can just run out the Rampager, untap all their creatures, and then the Minister of Inquiries being an energy sink, they can always make sure to return the Greenbelt Rampager to their hand, since they'll never have the 2 required energy to keep the Rampager in play. So they can keep untapping all their permanents, keep generating 1 energy every time, and then use the Minister to mill us. So our opponent's playing out the Rampager a couple times, generating mana every time. So they could maybe have a big spell they want to cast here. They only have 1 card left in hand, so not sure what that other card could be. It's an Oasis Ritualist, alright. So another way to generate more mana. So our opponent can generate, as much mana as they want, but I don't know if they're actually gonna do anything with it. Alright, their opponent crews the Cultivator's Caravan, but they don't have any great attacks into the Plunderer. And their opponent just passes. Alright, so we definitely want to keep up Fatal Push to take out that annoying Greenbelt Rampager. I think we start by cycling the Fetid Pools. Another Plunderers, interesting. So we could run out the Plunderers, but then we can't keep up Fatal Push, so I think we're just gonna run out Tezzeret here. Take out one of the opponent's creatures, and then keep up Fatal Push, and then play defense for a turn with the Plunderers to protect Tezzeret. So let's run out Tezzeret here, and I think we take out the Ritualist here, just because it's the most relevant body, and then we'll say go. Opponent found Ether Hub as their draw, and their opponent concedes. Alright, so up against Temur Paradox Engine, so Negate can counter the opponent's Paradox Engine, which is pretty appealing. Although there's not that many cards I really want to take out of the deck, I think. I could see maybe adding 1 or 2 Negates, but I don't want to go overboard, since the opponent is just mostly a creature deck. Maybe we can shave a Treasure Map, since we're afraid of getting comboed out, and might not have the time to really flip our Treasure Map. Maybe want a second Negate as well. Sure, I guess we can board in 2 Negates, take out both Treasure Maps, try something like this. Don't want to overboard since we still have our Metallic Rebuke as a counterspell, and don't want to dilute the deck too much since we do want to keep a certain number of artifacts in our deck to make the deck function. So we're on the draw, and this hand looks pretty good. We've got 2 of our payoff cards, our sideboarded Negate, and then 2 artifacts to enable Improvise and draw some cards. Definitely a keep. Opponent leads with Sheltered Thicket. We'll probably do the same in Fetid Pools here as we find Tezzeret, so we just want to make sure to hit our land drops here. As we see Shaper's Sanctuary from the opponent, so they're afraid of all our removal spells, which does make sense. Swamp the Draw is nice, so let's run out Prophetic Prism here, I think. Draw a card. Find a Reverse Engineer. So next turn we could run out the Puzzleknot, and the turn after Reverse Engineer. Had we played the Puzzleknot first, we could have Reverse Engineered the following turn here. We also see a Swamp, not sure what that's for. Fetid Pools a draw. We can just run out Fetid Pools, run out Puzzleknot, and next turn cast Herald of Anguish. That also seems pretty appealing. So let's go for it. Play out the Puzzleknot. Get a Servo, and then play out the tapped Fetid Pools, and be in a pretty good spot here if our opponent can't answer the Herald. If our opponent just has a combo, then I guess we're in trouble. So we could also opt to use Tezzeret to take out the Minister of Inquiries. If our opponent just slams a Paradox Engine here, we might have to, since we know about the Greenbelt Rampager in the opponent's hand. We basically want to get to the point where we have a Herald of Anguish in play and we can keep up Negate to counter the opponent's Paradox Engine. Instead we see a Trophy Mage that might just go get another Caravan here. Instead an Inspiring Statuary, so that's another way for the opponent to ramp. And they are attacking with Minister of Inquiries for 1, we'll take it. So our opponent doesn't have enough mana to cast Paradox Engine next turn unless they draw land. So I don't think we need to be afraid to get comboed out next turn. I think it's probably correct to run out the Herald of Anguish here, rather than spend a turn killing the Minister and letting the opponent draw a card. So yeah, let's run out the Herald. And hope that the opponent doesn't have something like a Harness Lightning to take care of our Herald, but even then they still have to discard a card end of turn, which is the nice part about Herald. So let's see what the opponent discards. They discard a Rampager, so they might have another one in hand, or they might just not have the combo, so therefore they don't value the Rampager very highly. Beginning of combat, our opponent's gonna crew the Caravan, so it looks like the opponent's on the beatdown plan here, and I think we're fine with that, given that we do have the Plunderers coming up in our future, and Tezzeret can take care of some of the opponent's creatures. And if our Herald survives, of course, our opponent has to discard every turn. There's the Inspiring Statuary. So our opponent could still cast a 2-drop. We find a swamp, so we could run out the Plunderers here. Or we can keep up Negate for potential shenanigans. But the problem with keeping up Negate is that we don't really get to progress our board in any significant way. I guess we can end of turn make an additional servo token, but that's about it. We could also maybe use the Herald's ability on the opponent's creatures, but then they do get to draw cards with the Sanctuary. I think I just like running out the Plunderers here after attacking, and then trying to win the race. So let's just hit for 6. I imagine if our opponent had something like a Harness Lightning, they would have cast it before taking 5. So second main phase, we're just gonna run out the Plunderers, and then, yeah, hope for the best. Opponent discards Oasis Ritualist. It's very unlikely that we get comboed out here, and in fact our opponent concedes. So Herald of Anguish, turn 4, turns out to be pretty powerful, and then we still had the combo covered here with Negate, unless they ran out the engine this turn, but then they still needed to top deck the Rampager to actually win the game. So alright, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, but unfortunately we have no land, so we'll have to go down to 6. This looks like a keepable hand, and Fatal Push can go to the bottom since we want to hit land drops. Let's find out what we're up against. Spirebluff Canal into Hope of Girapur, interesting. Not entirely sure what that means. Think we'll just play out a swamp, keep up push, and say go. Don't think we want to push the Hope of Girapur quite yet. So they hit us for 1. Mountain into Ether Swooper. Alright, so this looks to be the blue-red's Thopter / artifact deck. So I think we'll take out the Swooper here since that threatens to make an additional token. Now we can run out Servo Schematic. And then next turn we'll have access to Metallic Rebuke. Opponent hits us for 1. And Inventor's Goggles plus Bowmat Courier as follow-ups. Puzzleknot is actually a nice one since that'll still let us keep up Metallic Rebuke. I think we do attack for 1 here as well, as our opponent is unlikely to trade, and then we can still have an additional servo as a blocker. Don't think we want to battle at the bridge anything here, although we definitely could have if we wanted to. But I think we want to keep up Rebuke this turn, and then next turn we can battle even through Inventor's Goggles being equipped. Opponent just hits us with the Hope of Girapur. And Maverick Thopterist with Improvise is gonna get countered by an Improvise card. So we get to untap. Did not find a black source to let us cast our Herald of Anguish. Instead we find a Deadeye Plunderers, which we can't cast. We could use Battle at the Bridge here, but I don't think we want to. So I would rather just attack for 1, keep back a servo to block the Bowmat Courier, and then represent having something like another Metallic Rebuke, and say go here. Opponent does not equip, so they're happy just to pack in for 1. And they're gonna sacrifice Hope of Girapur. Alright, so we can't cast non-creature spells, so we can't counter whatever this is, which is another Maverick Thopterist. As it turns out, we did not have the Metallic Rebuke, so we could not counter the Thopterist anyways. Opponent gets a free equip, which is pretty nice here. But this does mean we don't get to cast Battle at the Bridge here, and also can't cast our treasure map, which is pretty unfortunate. Had we drawn a swamp and cast Herald of Anguish, we would have been in a very good position, but right now we're kind of getting punished a little bit for not having access to double black. So I think we'll just have to say go here, since we don't really have another option. No great attacks. If our opponent does not have something like Harness Lightning, and we get to resolve Herald of Anguish, I think we're probably gonna win this game. But right now we're in a bit of trouble. So we take 5 down to 11. Opponent has a Whirler Virtuosa, which we don't have an answer for, and that's gonna generate 3 more energy, bringing them up to 5. And we just have to untap, find a Prophetic Prism, so we can run out the Prism and then still be in a position to draw into a swamp and cast Herald. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yes. And if not, we can still just play out Battle at the Bridge. The other option is running out Treasure Map and scrying, but that seems pretty weak. So let's go with the Prophetic Prism. Draw a card. Find a Fatal Push. Not quite what we need here. So I think we do want to cast our Battle at the Bridge. Let's battle for 4. And say go. Now that we did find Prophetic Prism, we are in a position to cast our Herald of Anguish. Since we can filter some mana, opponent makes a Thopter end of turn. So I still think that if the opponent doesn't have an answer to our Herald, we could be okay here. And now our opponent is attacking with the Bowmat Courier. So they might see that we're otherwise able to cast our Herald of Anguish, since if we trade off Servo with the Bowmat Courier, then we would have to draw another land in order to cast our Herald of Anguish, essentially. Pretty heads-up attack by our opponent, or their hand might just be terrible and they want to get some cards with the Courier. I think we just take it here. As much as I'd like to block the Bowmat Courier, if our opponent sees this, they could just take out a Servo before we're able to cast a Herald. Instead, another Maverick Thopterist. Opponent has 2 cards left in hand. If one of those is Harness Lightning, that's not good for us. Instead, we find the Catacomb. Alright, so we can now just cast the Herald without needing to filter mana. So we can play out Herald. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then still keep up Prophetic Prism for Fatal Push. Otherwise we could run out Treasure Map as well, and then still run out the Herald of Anguish. But I think it's gonna come down to every last point of damage, so... Cast our Herald, opponent has to discard end of turn. Opponent discards another Thopterist, so their last card must be pretty good here. Opponent moves to combat, so I think we'll let that happen. Opponent gets in with everyone. If we block the Thopterist, we would take 5, 6, 7, 8 to 2. I think we need to Fatal Push a Thopter token instead of the Courier, since we can actually block the Courier on the ground next turn. Push a Thopter. And then go to blocks. Block the biggest one, still take 7 to 3. Opponent runs out Walking Ballista for 1. Find a swamp for our draw step, so we could run out Deadeye Plunderers, or we could use the Herald's ability twice, even get a Servo by sacking the Servo Schematic. That is pretty appealing. So in the opponent's draw step, I think we want to take out the Bowmat Courier. Opponent has to discard end of turn, discard Unlicensed Disintegration, that's a good one to know about. And then in the opponent's draw step, we'll take out the Courier by sacking Servo Schematic. Opponent sacks a Courier to get those 2 cards. Spire of Industry. So if our opponent just attacks with everyone, can block 1, kill 1, and then we're still dead to the Walking Ballista here. So we are dead on board, but of course our opponent doesn't know our hand, so we could still have something like a Fatal Push. They're equipping a Thopter, so in response we can kill it by sacking the Prophetic Prism. So if our opponent goes for it here, we're dead. And our opponent does indeed go for it. So this would be a risky attack if we had another Fatal Push, since then we would be able to block a Thopter, kill 1, chump, and then only take 1 damage from the Thopters, and then Ballista would not be lethal. But as it is, we don't have the Fatal Push, so we can't actually survive here, so we'll have to concede. Alright, on to sideboarding. So I think the Gifted Aetherborn is probably worth it, since we want as much life gain as possible, since we can't actually properly deal with all the flyers. Jace's Defeat is interesting. Gonti is interesting. Tezzeret's Touch is also a consideration, as is, I guess, Scrapheap Scrounger, so actually a lot of potential options. In that game, unfortunately, we were not able to cast the Plunderers in time since we struggled to hit a few land drops. Treasure Map might be a little too slow for this matchup, so I could see taking that out. So we might just side like this. I guess Tezzeret's not at its best since the opponent has a lot of tokens and Tezzeret's not very good against those. So I could see taking out some or even all of the Tezzerets. So what would we want instead of Tezzeret? Gonti seems okay, although not fantastic. But I guess we took out 3/4 drops, so we might as well put one in. And then do we want Tezzeret's Touch? Put this on one of our artifacts and try to beat down instead of playing a longer grindy game. Reverse Engineer is also cuttable, but I think we'll keep that for now. We would like to play first. And this hand's not great since we only have the one land, but we do have a Renegade Map. Fortunately, our only land is our tap land. So it's a close one, but I think this is a mulligan just because it's a tad too slow. And this one doesn't have any lands in it, so that's also gonna be a mulligan, unfortunately. And still no lands. It's difficult to play Magic without lands, so I guess we'll keep this one. And Puzzleknot is actually not that great, so we'll bottom that as well. So pretty rough mulligan here. I would be surprised if we somehow still manage to win this one. Turn 1 Hope of Ghirapur. Alright, Contraband Kingpin is actually a nice one here. So now we just need to find some artifacts and then a Herald of Anguish. Opponent gets in for 1. We get to untap, find a swamp. So we'll also attack for 1 here. And then say go, representing Metallic Rebuke. Although with only 2 cards in hand, I don't think our opponent's gonna play around many counterspells. Ether Hub. Opponent gets in for 1. Still not really interested in fatal pushing the Hope of Ghirapur. And Pianalar. That works. Can't kill PR herself. We could kill the Thopter, but we might as well kill the Hope of Ghirapur at that point, so I don't think we do anything here. Battle at the Bridge is not bad, so we can just take out Pia and attack for 1. I think that's a play. Would like to get rid of the artifacts, since that makes it so our opponent can't cast their expensive Improvise cards, but I don't think we're in the position to throw away removal spells just to answer 1/1 flyers. Opponent does hit a land number 4. We saw last game that they're running Unlicensed Disintegration, so if they could have that. Instead they do have the Thopterist, but they had land number 4 anyway, so killing a Thopter would not have stopped this. And Hope of Ghirapur gets in. So this is a matchup where having some sweeper effects would be nice. Even something like a Rags to Riches to give everything -2/-2 would be nice. Instead we just have to say go. Deadeye Plunderers, not actually the worst, but we do need a land number 5. We'll say go here just to be able to block the Thopterist. And there's a Driven. That's interesting, so the opponent will be able to draw a whole bunch of cards here. So that's an interesting splash card. And they're also gonna cast the Despair, so we'll let them attack first and then we can fatal push one of the opponent's creatures. I guess we'll kill the Hope. And then, yeah, we take a bunch of damage, our opponent draws a bunch of cards. So that's some pretty neat technology from the opponent's deck. So we have to discard our Plunderers. Opponent gets to draw a bunch of cards up to 7. Now we find a land that would have been able to cast our Plunderers. Still not gonna attack here since we wanna be able to block the Thopterist. And there's a Glorybringer, which is gonna bring glory to the opponent and is gonna spell our demise, as it's gonna exert to kill our Kingpin. We'll take a total of 9 damage. And while not exactly a 2-turn clock, I don't think we can draw out of this one. Swamp the draw, so we'll let our opponent play 1 more turn just to show off their deck, which is pretty interesting, I've got to say. And there's Vizier of Many Faces, so they can copy their Glorybringer and hit us once again. Alright, sweet. So not the best draws on our part, but still an interesting game, I think, at least the first one. So on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and unfortunately we only have the one land here. Do have Treasure Map and Prophetic Prism to help us out, but overall I think this is still probably a mulligan. And this looks like a keepable hand. We're missing blue mana, but with the Scry, there we go, we can keep it on top. And be in a pretty good position here, since we can turn to run out Kingpin, then run out Treasure Map, scry once with the Kingpin, scry again with the Treasure Map, and then we're getting close to casting Tezzeret and Herald. Opponent also with turn 1 Swamp, turn 2 Swamp, into Darfleet Hoarder, so this could be the mono-black Monument deck or some sort of treasure deck. Kingpin matches up pretty nicely against the Hoarder. Opponent could have a Fatal Push to stop us from blocking, but that's gonna happen no matter what. So let's see if the opponent has an answer to the Kingpin, as we see a Field of Ruin make an appearance. 3 mana for a Weaponcraft Enthusiast, so yeah, this definitely looks like the mono-black Monument slash Marionette Master deck. So we want to try and keep our Metallic Rebukes for those Marionette Masters. So we get to untap, run out Treasure Map here, scry, and Renegade Map I think can go to the bottom. Not the highest impact card, although it would accelerate us towards Herald in some way, but there's better artifacts we can find, plus we still get a scry from Treasure Map to find something better. Gonna say go, and then we can scry end of turn just to represent having some additional interaction. And there's the Bonto's Monument, so Monument confirmed into another Darfleet Hoarder. Opponent drains us for 1. Another Herald is tempting, but we are pretty far from casting it, so I don't actually know if we can keep this. So next turn we can run out Tezzeret, we can plus it or minus it to take out one of the opponent's creatures, although that's not very appealing. So if we plus it, we'll have an additional artifact, and then maybe turn 5 we'll be able to cast our Herald. I guess we'll keep it on top, and just the plan here is to run out Tezzeret, make an artifact, and then try to cast our Heralds the following 2 turns. And our opponent now incentivized to start attacking Tezzeret. We find a Catacomb. I think we can put that on the bottom since we already have land number 5. So we'll say go. What we could also do is use the Ethereum Cell to scry 1 with the Treasure Map, as then we would be able to use the Treasure Map once again next turn to get those 3 treasures. So that's also an option that's on the table. And is this Marionette Master? Definitely looks like it. Yep, there it is. So let's see if the opponent goes for the tokens or for the bigger master. Opponent goes for a 4/6 master. So whenever an artifact the opponent controls dies, we lose 4 life essentially. And that means that if we block the Darfleet Hoarder, our opponent gets a treasure, and they can sacrifice that treasure to drain us for 4. So everything going at Tezzeret. If we don't block, Tezzeret dies. So it's probably worth it to block one of the Darfleet Hoarders here. Save Tezzeret. Opponent does get a treasure, but that's fine. And our opponent's gonna sack it right away to deal 4 damage, and they're also gonna run out an additional Darfleet Hoarder, but they're now empty-handed. So we just need to find an answer to this Marionette Master, and then we're in a decent spot. So do we want to put an additional counter on the Treasure Map? It's probably worth it here. So let's scry once again. Renegade Map can go to the bottom. And then I guess in our upkeep we can scry again. So let's use Treasure Map once again. Reverse Engineer is interesting, but I think we bottomed that still. Get 3 treasures, scry 3 more times. Basically looking for an answer to the Marionette Master. bottom that, and bottom that. Take our draw step, find the Drowned Catacomb, so now we can run out Herald of Anguish, paying for Improvise costs, and then we'll +1 once again, making an additional artifact, scrying with the Kingpin. Fatal Push doesn't quite do it here, so we'll bottom that. Looking for our Battle at the Bridge would be our best card, I think. Another Tezzeret would be fine as well. Opponent has to discard, but they were already empty-handed, so don't get any value from our Herald, unfortunately. Opponent has an Hour of Glory. Well, that's a pretty good top deck, I would say. Exiling our Heralds. They don't get to look at our hand because it wasn't a god, but we do have another Herald coming up. So Marionette Master and the gang attacking Tezzeret. Let's see, Marionette Master is the only one attacking Tezzeret. Had we kept something like a Servo Schematic on top, we would have gotten close to just killing the Marionette Master with Tezzeret himself. I don't think it's worth it to jump with our Contraband Kingpin, so I think we'll still just go ahead and block a Hoarder here, despite that being another 4 life lost. Then we'll let the Tezzeret go, and then we can run out another Herald that can double block on the Kingpin to take it out, so that we don't die. So we get to untap, we'll draw, find a Fatal Push. We can enable Fatal Push by sacking a treasure to our treasure cove or just sacking it, but there's no super valuable creatures we want to take out here. I think we can start by drawing, since we still have enough mana to cast our Herald. Find another Fatal Push. Alright, let's run out our Herald. And say go. So we can use the Herald's ability as well, so I don't think the opponent can afford to attack with the Marionette Master, otherwise they'll lose it in combat. And then I guess next turn we can just sacrifice 3 treasures or Ethereum cells to the Herald's ability to take out the Master. So we're actually not in a horrible spot here if we can survive this turn. Opponent sending in 2 servos. I think we just take 2. And then the plan is to take out the Master next turn and try to win that way. Opponent lets us untap. We draw, find a Battle at the Bridge, perfect, so that's the answer we were looking for. Yeah, I think we just cast a giant Battle at the Bridge here, tapping everything just to gain as much life as possible. X equals 9. Opponent's gonna sack a treasure just to deal 4. Putting us to 5, and that works, and now we get to attack for 5 with our Herald. We'll keep the Kingpin on defense, and then we're in a pretty commanding position, I would say, since we get to draw extra cards from the Treasure Cove. Opponent has to discard to the Herald, they just discard a Swamp. And then these 2 Fatal Pushes can clean up any additional creatures our opponent has. Bontu the Glorified, that's not bad, but we can actually kill that with our Herald, since giving -2/-2 3 times can still deal with the Indestructible God. So let's take our draw step, find a Metallic Rebuke, a little late. Let's attack for 5. We could also try to draw a card with our Treasure Cove, try to find something better, but I think that's a little too risky here. And I think we take out Bontu right now before our opponent gets to untap and sacrifice more creatures. So that's 1 activation. That's 2 activations. And that's 3 activations. So with Bontu about to die, our opponent sacrifices the Enthusiast to drain us. And now our opponent gets 1 draw step here to find something good. And then after that we get to keep up Metallic Rebuke. So hopefully this is not another Marionette Master, instead it's just a land, and now we should be in a good spot. Opponent passes. Don't think we Fatal Push anything here. Untap, draw Servo Schematic. Play that out, get some more scries. Renegade Map on the bottom. Kingpin can stay on top, I think. It's better than an average draw. So we get to say go, and then keep up Metallic Rebuke to counter future Marionette Masters. Ruthless Knave. Cannot counter that one. End of turn we'll just take out the Knave. Sacrificing the Servo Schematic, get an additional Servo. Also get to scry with the Kingpin. Opponent's probably gonna sacrifice the Knave to itself just to get 2 treasures. I guess at this point we can bottom the Kingpin, untap, find an island. I guess we'll also attack with the servos now their opponent gained a life, and our math is a little off. Opponent's pretty happy to trade here since they want the treasure in case they top deck another Marionette Master. But Metallic Rebuke I think ensures that we can't die to the Marionette Master since they would be forced to sacrifice the treasures to make it resolve. And with the trigger from the Marionette Master on the stack we could also shrink it down, so our opponent deals less damage to us. If near dead lands a draw, so that can shrink down our Herald. But yeah, I think we have our opponent dead here since we can just Fatal Push both Servo tokens. And then we still have lethal. Alright, so we got there. On to sideboarding against Mono Black Monument. So Marionette Master definitely a pretty big problem for us since we only have the Metallic Rebuke to really counter it and then Battle at the Bridge as a clean answer to it. So what don't we like? Fatal Push seems pretty weak, as we don't really want to kill the opponent's small dorks, but I could see keeping in 2 copies just in case. Gifted Aetherborn could be okay as a way to gain some additional life, so I could see bringing in the Aetherborns. I think we'll try it like this. This hand's a little slow, but probably still keepable, as I don't really want to go to 6 when we have a playable hand, even if it's not the most exciting hand. Another Fetid Pools, so let's play one of those, say go. Our opponent with the turn 2 Syndicate Trafficker. That's fine, so we can Fatal Push that, play a Fetid Pool tapped. That seems okay. We could also run out Puzzleknot and trade Servo for Trafficker should our opponent want to attack. Yeah, let's run out the Puzzleknot. I don't think our opponent's gonna attack into it. Although it would have been nice to be able to play one of our tap lands that turn. And there's Bontu the Glorified. That's pretty good. No attacks from the Trafficker. Island to draw, so here we can push the Trafficker right now, and then even get in for 1, and then play a tap Fetid Pools, or we can just play out Aetherborn. Playing out Aetherborn definitely is pretty appealing. It's probably more mana efficient to run out the Aetherborn here. Field of Ruin. Opponent sacrifices the Syndicate Trafficker so they can attack with Bontu. So we get to save our Fatal Push for a future creature. Although our opponent does get to deal a total of 5 damage. If they can't kill the Aetherborn, we will be gaining some life back, is the good news. So we'll take 4. And our opponent passes. Alright, interesting. So let's start by attacking for 3 here. See if our opponent has a Fatal Push for the Aetherborn. They do not. So second main, I think we just run out Treasure Map, scry. Well, keep up the option to scry and then play out a tapped Fetid Pools. That way we can play out the Plunderers next turn. And now we still get to keep up Fatal Push just in case. Argyll's Bloodfast. Yeah, that's gonna resolve. So our opponent can start drawing a bunch of cards. But I like having our Aetherborn in play, pressuring the opponent's life total so they can't just draw all the cards they want to. So end of turn we'll scry with Treasure Map. Swamp can go to the bottom. And we'll untap. And then we'll attack for 3. And run out one of our Plunderers. Which is right now a 6/6 and is only gonna get bigger. So our opponent under some pressure, Let's see if they have a Marionette Master here to try and stabilize. There it is. Does our opponent go for big Marionette Master or small Marionette Master? Alright, they're going for the tokens. Can't blame them. So we could set a stop on our upkeep to scry with Treasure Map, but we're probably just gonna run out the other Plunderers here, so we drew a land, so we also can run out a Renegade Map here. So let's start by playing out Renegade Map to grow our Plunderer, and then attack. And do we want to attack with the Aetherborn as well? Yeah, I think we do. So let's attack. Opponent just chumps. So we lose one to the Master. Then second main, we're gonna run out another Plunderer. And say go. Now I will definitely put a stop on our upkeep to scry with Treasure Map, since we don't have anything else to spend our mana on. Syndicate Trafficker could be annoying, since our opponent can sacrifice an artifact to make that indestructible and put a counter on it. That'll also turn on Bontu, but we do have the Fatal Push to potentially take care of it. Weaponcraft Enthusiast is a little scary, since now our opponent has a ton of tokens to block with, along with the Master. At least the Master is only draining for 1 every time, so no attacks from our opponents. So upkeep we will scry with our Treasure Map. Cogworker's Puzzleknot is interesting as it grows the Plunderers, but I think we can do better. So let's take our draw step. Prophetic Prism, can lead with that. Draw an additional card. And Tezzeret the Schemer is excellent. So we can sacrifice a Renegade Map to get a land, run out Tezzeret, and then can't quite take out Bontu, but we can take out Marionette Master. So let's do that. Get a Swamp. Run out Tezzeret. And we actually have a few options here, but I think I'm fine with taking out the Master. See if our opponent wants to sacrifice any servos in response here. Opponent does sacrifice a servo, so they drain us for 1. And now that the Trafficker is indestructible, I don't think we want to make any attacks here. So I think I'll just say go and protect our Tezzeret. And then next turn we might be able to take out Bontu, since we get the 3 treasures from Treasure Map. And having 2 7/7s means we get to block the menacing Bontu. And there's a Bontu's Monument. No attacks from the opponent. Knave joins the fray as our opponent's last card. Upkeep, we'll use Treasure Map once again. Battle at the Bridge can stay on top. So we get to use Tezzeret to blow up Bontu. That works, and now we have a giant Battle at the Bridge for the Syndicate Trafficker. And our opponent concedes. Alright, sweet, I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached, we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.